When you have negative and pessimistic thoughts, then you start to realize, oh, my mind's really busy and it's always harboring on these terrible thoughts. But when you are able to shift that through your practice and you're starting to have more positive, optimistic thoughts, then that's a great thing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Resonate, where we explore how we can harness the power of storytelling, create authentic personal brands, and scale our businesses with smart systems. Now, on the episode today has been somebody who's on my radar for quite some time. His name is Light Watkins. I will introduce you to a little bit more about what he does later. But first, what I have noticed through the coaching and the programs that I have been running is an increased curiosity in meditation as a practice to live calmer, more grounded, and less stressful lives. So I wanted to bring on somebody who is really an expert in this, who could speak to it from his own personal experience and all of the work he does, also coaching other people, going into companies, doing keynote speaking, and so forth. So with no further ado, Light, thank you so much for joining Resonate.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
So I know that some people listening are either already very open to the idea of meditation and some who are completely closed to it, who have all the doubts, who maybe have said at some moment, oh, I tried to do this and it's really not for me. And I just can't do it. I just can't stop thinking. I'm highly uncomfortable. And I want to start with those people because I used to be one of them myself. Maybe you were too. So I want to go back to the place where you were in your life before meditation became something that you even decided to teach for a living.
Yeah. So I was first introduced to meditation back in the 90s when I lived in New York City. And I had been dabbling in yoga, and one of my yoga teachers invited me to a meditation circle at his apartment. And yeah, I had all those thoughts like, this is not for me. My mind's too busy. This is too uncomfortable and the whole thing. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people kind of get stuck there. And I got very, very lucky in that when I moved to Los Angeles a few years after that first experience, I was introduced to this guy who was a meditation guru, a teacher, and he was very, very talented in making the practice accessible and also making it delightful, which was, after knocking my head against the wall for literally like 3 or 4 years, it was like happening upon this oasis in the middle of a desert. And I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. And that's what hooked me to meditation. And without having had that experience, I probably would still be saying meditation's not really for me. And what's interesting is, you have people like David Goggins, who a lot of people look up to and envy. And David Goggins, will go out and run, 1,000 miles in a week or whatever his crazy extreme thing is, which I also, have a lot of admiration for the stamina and the endurance. But even someone like David Goggins, even someone like Tony Robbins, right? These are people who are literally operating at the top of their field. They say, oh, I can't meditate. My mind's too busy. So,
They still say
it's
that.
even crack people like that who would rather jump into an ice cold plunge in the morning, that's Tony Robbins, or run 100 miles, then sit down and close their eyes for 20, 30 minutes. So there's something about not really understanding what you're doing, because I know that they don't understand how to relate to their mind, because otherwise you wouldn't be having those experiences. That would cause us to look for other outlets for the whatever stress or whatever we happen to be under. And so that's what I've been doing all these years, is showing people, hey, it doesn't have to look like that. And then once I show them how to relate to their busy mind, they love it.
When I started with this, I felt an enormous discomfort being with my thoughts. And I hadn't had any exposure to this level of self-awareness, or asking yourself your own questions, taking a little bit of distance, taking the observer's seat, and understanding what I'm actually saying to myself. And I think that's something that that prohibits so many of us actually from taking this leap, because you're met with such an intense discomfort. And perhaps you have to go through this hurdle of facing things you don't want to see.
Mhm.
Was that ever your experience, or is it the experience of people you work with?
Initially, yeah. I mean, focusing on the thoughts in meditation is like, it's imagine a world where nobody knew how to swim. And all people would talk about is how horrible the water was, and the water is so cold and it's so scary and it's so I don't want to be surrounded. But if you know how to swim, it's not a problem. You don't even, the water, talking about the quality of the water is no longer even a part of that conversation because you know how to navigate it. And that's what I do is I show people how to navigate their busy mind. And once they understand how to do that, they don't have to talk about it anymore. The thoughts are not even a relevant part of the discussion anymore because you know how to move through it. When you don't know how to move through it, that's all people talk about is, oh, I was thinking about this, I was thinking about that, because it feels like you're drowning in your thoughts. Just like if you don't know how to swim, you feel like you're drowning in the water.
Mm-hmm. Let me change a little tack here, because I have been reading a lot about how artificial intelligence is really changing the game in so many respects. And there's quite a bit of divergent thinking in terms of what makes us ultimately human and creative and intuitive. And we have something that perhaps artificial intelligence doesn't. And I've heard some people express the opinion that if we are able to meditate well and reduce the let's say the amount of thoughts that we have, we're potentially opening ourselves up to having more intuitive insights, or things that can come in that otherwise would be obstructed if we are just constantly having this layer of thoughts that are ceaseless.
Mhm.
Have you ever thought of that?
Yes, I have thought a lot about that very deeply. And, you know, it's the thinking thing is not really a quantity issue, as you hinted. It's more of a quality issue, right?
Okay.
Nobody's complaining about having too many happy or creative thoughts, but you're having the same number of thoughts as people who have negative and pessimistic thoughts. So when you have negative and pessimistic thoughts, then you start to realize, oh, my mind's really busy and it's always harboring on these terrible thoughts. But when you are able to shift that through your practice and you're starting to have more positive, optimistic thoughts, then that's a great thing. And you're getting all these creative ideas and all these epiphanies, insights, and downloads. And you come out just ready to go into action to start to experiment with all these things you were thinking about in and around the practice. So once you make that shift, then again, the mind being busy is not really relevant anymore. Now, one other thing I want to say from the technical perspective, the reason why you're having these negative thoughts is not because your brain is broken or because you just are flawed in some way. The reason is because those are symptomatic of stress built up in your body. That's all it is. And when the body is releasing stress as a result of meditation, the side effect is you have stressful thoughts, right? So a lot of people mistake that for meaning, oh, meditation is causing me to have all these, like as if they're coming in, but actually it's the opposite. They're going out. And it's the same thing as if you're on a treadmill and you start sweating. Like that's a part of upping your heart rate and getting in better cardiovascular shape is you start sweating, maybe you have a little soreness after the fact. That's all those negative thoughts are representing is something is coming back into balance in your body. So the thing that you're using as a reason not to meditate is actually symptomatic of meditation actually working. So it's like I don't want to get on the treadmill, I don't want to exercise because I don't want to sweat. That's how ridiculous it sounds when you finally understand the mechanics of the meditation.
Mhm. I've never heard it put in such a way. And I am wondering for those who perhaps are questioning, well, I've heard all about entering a negative thought spiral. So surely, how could this be sort of evacuation of the negative energies from my body? Instead, could this be somewhere that I become stuck if I allow myself to play these negative loops without gaining some distance from that?
So the distance that people are looking for happens outside of the meditation. So in the meditation, you can sit there and you can think about all these negative aspects of a relationship that you've had with someone. Maybe they were abusive, maybe they were toxic, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the way the meditation is working is outside of meditation. When you get reminded of that person, there's less of a reaction, there's more spaciousness. And you can only know that from having had the experience. This is not an intellectual concept. You have to have the visceral experience of that non-reactivity when that person's name or when their likeness or image or that conversation comes up, and you find yourself slower to react to whatever the past has been around that situation. Now, obviously, if there's a dangerous situation, you're still going to react, in the proper way, which is hopefully you're going to be in the fight flight reaction. If it's a legitimately dangerous situation, but most of the things that we're reacting stressfully around are not legitimately dangerous situations. They're memories of things that happened a long, 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 long time ago that are now being projected onto whatever's happening right now. It's reminding the body, not the mind, it's reminding your body of what happened when you were maybe a child, and the reaction is very quick and very all consuming, in which case it pulls you out of the present moment and it makes you say things and do things that you end up having to apologize for later. So that's the alternative to having the what you call the negative spiral, is you just get controlled by your stress. Your stress dictates how adaptable you are, how well you digest your food, how well you sleep at night, which for a lot of people is at the lower end of that spectrum. So, yes, you have to sit through some of what feels like negative spirals or whatever people want to call them. But the benefit is you get liberated from your past, in which case you get to be more present in your current life. Doesn't mean life is going to
Yes.
necessarily get easy or fun, but you won't constantly get reminded of what happened 10, 20, 30 years ago.
And you create a certain level of resilience as well.
Correct.
Yes. What would you say for the people who are doubting this, want to get started, and want to know what some of the tangible benefits are of this?
Of a daily meditation practice?
Yeah, of a meditation practice. I guess I'm hearing the daily. We haven't brought that up, but this is, I guess, what we're constantly. Well, this probably makes where people switch off, like, oh no, no, how is that going to work? But okay, we'll get the idea. We start with a daily meditation practice, but what is some of the transformation that some people could hope to achieve from this? How could that improve their daily life, their relationships, their health?
So, one word, adaptability. You become more adaptable, or as you say, more resilient to the changes, the demands, and the pressures that we're all experiencing on a daily basis, right? If you think about the last time you described having a good day versus a bad day, what's the difference in those 2 days? It's not because somebody accidentally deposited $1 million into your bank account, and or someone uh, gave you a gift of some sort. Usually those kind of things don't happen very often. When we have a good day, a good day typically is a day where we're more adaptable, meaning we're more present, we're more responsive as opposed to reactive. We feel more connected to ourselves, to the people around us. So we could still be experiencing lots of demands and pressures, but if we're able to successfully navigate those demands and pressures, then we feel better about ourselves and about our capabilities, just to operate and navigate through the human experience, versus those days where we're just falling short and we're snappy, we misread something, we misinterpret something, we make a lot of mistakes. Well, that's happening because we're projecting something onto a situation that's not actually what's happening. Usually that projection comes from something in our past, and we end up saying something or overreacting in a certain way that is not reflective of our most authentic self. And then again, like I said, we have to apologize for it, or we have to clean it up, which takes time away from the thing that we probably need to be doing otherwise. And so if we have enough of those moments in a given day, that's a bad day. That's a bad day. That's a day we're not proud of. Versus the other day where we can have the same amount of demands and pressures, yet we're present to what is truly needed. We're able to show up in our most authentic self and that those are the days we end up telling lots of stories about anecdotes. Maybe it comes up on our keynotes, speeches and these kinds of moments that we're really proud of. And so
Mm.
that's what meditation does, is it gives us access to our ability that we all have inside to adapt to changes. Just like we all have the ability to react stressfully, we have the ability to respond adaptively. And so if we don't put ourselves in the position to be able to do that, then it's not going to happen as frequently as we oftentimes hope.
Absolutely. I love this distinction that you've mentioned now multiple times between reactivity and responsiveness. So for anyone listening who isn't aware of that, correct me if I'm wrong, Light, but the reactivity comes from those automatic reactions
Yeah.
that we don't have that pause or that space to reflect and choose how we wish to respond. Whereas on the other hand, the responding is like making that distance and having that little pause and being able to carefully choose what our next best step is. When I initially came across this concept, it was through A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a really
Mhm.
inspiring man who had lived through the Holocaust. And he was one of the few survivors in the camp where he lived, or the camp where he was placed. And he realized in himself that one of the last freedoms that were not able to be taken away from him was that freedom to choose and that freedom to like live in his own mind. And he, I think, famously gave this quote around between stimulus and response, there is a space. And that space is where I'm mixing up the words here, but I think it's, that space is where we have the freedom and the choice to choose. And that is so powerful. And I think also spoken from somebody who has lived through such hardship to go, wow, in that moment of absolute difficulty, if you just build out that space to pause, to take a breath, to carefully consider, it can make the world of difference. And I'm sure many people listening can relate to that in so many ways. I've had moments as a mother, for example, where my son has done something that I didn't like, or I felt went against the grain of what we should do, and I didn't make that space adequately. And of course, I then stepped into the reactivity of getting frustrated in that moment or overreacting.
Mhm.
Whereas maybe what you're saying here is that if I and others were to have a daily meditation practice to build that level of resiliency, we would have a greater ability to adapt in those moments and to respond in the way we wish to.
And to take it a little bit further, it becomes automated. You don't want to have to make this an intellectual exercise where you're having to manage it. Okay, now I'm going to be responsive. Now I'm going to try not to be reactive, because
That'd be a match, wouldn't
that's
it?
just going to add to the whole mess
The
of it
stress.
all. Yeah, exactly. You want it to be automated. It needs to be cultivated. And so that's why you can't just listen to this podcast and then all of a sudden, now magically you're responsive as opposed to reactive. It needs to be cultivated in the same way that doing a pull up needs to be cultivated, right? We all understand how you do a pull up. You grab the bar, you pull yourself up, but it's not dependent on intellectual understanding or your good intention or any
Would
of
be
that.
nice though, but yes,
That would be nice,
unfortunately.
but
Yeah.
the way you do a pull up is you have to cultivate the strength to do it, and that only comes from practice, exercising and practice on a regular basis, and then eventually you'll get to a point where you can pull yourself up. And
Mhm.
happiness, resilience, fulfillment, all these terms that we aspire toward, they're like these muscles, and we need to cultivate the inner strength to be able to tap into that without even necessarily wanting to or caring about it. We just find that that's what we're able to do, because we put in the work. And so, yeah, meditation can help you do that. But then the next question is, okay, how do I meditate in a way that encourages me to do it again the next day and the next day and the next day? And this is where people have the big problem, because a lot of us will hear this and go, yeah, yeah, I want to meditate every day, but I don't like sitting there battling with my mind for 20 minutes every day. So then I say that in order to have a successful practice, it has to, on some level, feel good. It has to feel delightful, right? And that usually comes down to the way you engage with your mind. And a lot of people, what they do is they see their mind as the enemy of the meditation. And one simple mindset shift that you'll find very, very helpful, no matter what technique you're practicing, is you want to start to see your mind as the ally of the practice. In the same way that if you were about to go and learn how to swim, if you look at the water as your enemy that you have to fight, you're going to drown, right? Versus looking at the water as your ally, it's actually there to help you glide and float. And so then you just have to learn the mechanics. And once you learn the mechanics, whether you want to glide across the water or not, you'll start to move across the water. And the
Mhm.
same thing happens with meditation. That's how you make it delightful.
So, where do you recommend people who are unfamiliar with this get started?
So I've been in this space for a long time, a couple of decades now, at least. And there are not a lot of really good resources out there for this kind of understanding, like simple understanding of how the mind works in meditation. Here's the thing that most people don't realize, but I'll break it down for you right now. Okay. 99% of meditation books are not written by people who teach meditation to regular people. They're written by monks, they're written by celebrities, they're written by scientists, right? They're written by priests. They're written by either celibates, monastics, or people who have had a personal meditation practice that they really enjoyed and they want to share it. They want to share it with other people. But rarely do people who are on the front lines of teaching regular people how to enjoy meditation have a book that becomes a New York Times bestseller, because that's a whole other thing. Like, publishers give book deals not to people who have the best ideas or the best way of
No.
experiencing something. They give book deals to people who have the biggest following,
Audience.
the biggest
Yes.
audience. That's who gets book deals 95% of the time. So you need to understand this. When you go get the new popular meditation book, usually that's why you'll see this person giving you an assortment of 100 different meditation practices to choose from, which then leads to paralysis analysis. Most of it is guided meditation. Please tell me how you're going to do a guided meditation from a book. I don't know if it's possible, because you have to look at the book in order to find the guidance, right? So, right off the bat, you want a silent practice, meaning non-guided, something that you can do without having to open your eyes and read the next line of the chapter. And you want something that you can do pretty much anywhere, and you don't have to be a celibate or a monastic person to do it, which means you don't have to sit with your back straight. You don't have to count your chakras or any of that kind of stuff. You want to just be able to keep it really, really, really basic, really simple. And so, to answer your question, I wrote a book called Bliss More: How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying. This was the book I wish I had back when I first was trying to meditate, and was very unsuccessful in trying to figure out how to make this thing enjoyable. So,
Mhm.
the subtitle, How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying, is a literal interpretation of what you are learning. There's one technique, just like when you're swimming. Let's say it's, the easiest technique to swim, the freestyle swim. I just teach the one technique, and then you can obviously build upon that if you ever want to. But that's the one that you're going to find the easiest and most enjoyable time understanding and then ultimately mastering. And all it is really just sitting with your back supported, and not resisting your mind at all. So treating your mind like a friend as opposed to an enemy. I call the technique the easy approach to meditation, which stands for embrace, accept, surrender, and yield to whatever's happening in and around you.
Amazing. I want to break some of that down. So, I love this comment about, and I didn't realize that actually, about most of the meditation books, or the overwhelming majority of meditation books, being written by people with, I guess, with whom most of the listeners wouldn't particularly identify with. And I, funnily enough, live right next door to Tibetan monastery on the top of a hill in Switzerland. So I actually look out of my bedroom window and have monks in their prayer room. And one morning I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and have a look and join them and see what they do. And I remember coming out, I'd crossed my legs for a good hour. All I had was pins and needles. And then they were chanting in a language that I had no idea what was going on. I think towards the last 20 minutes, I zoned out to such an extent that I forgot that I had pins and needles. But otherwise, I didn't fully resonate with it, right? It didn't feel like my culture. It didn't feel like something that I could connect with and introduce into my daily life. And and yet I knew that there was something in this because I had a moment that struck me one day where I was very busily engaging about my daily life, going from one thing to the other. And I said, okay, I'm just gonna sit down for 5 minutes. And I remember just flopping down into this chair and then realizing I don't have my phone. First thought, I don't have a device. And I don't know what to do. It so struck me because I realized that I was so immensely uncomfortable with slowing down. And that's really what sparked this whole process of why? Well, actually, why am I uncomfortable slowing down? Why do I always have to be enormously productive to feel like that's how I best achieve and so forth? And is there something else there? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what opened me to all of these things. I'm sure you're very familiar. Maybe you teach this too with like nervous system regulation and living in survival mode. And what does that mean? You know? So I think for people who are in that space, what would you say when you start that practice of you sit down, we follow your technique. You said the easy technique. What was it? Embrace. What was the next one? Surrender and yield. What was the A?
Accept.
Accept. So if I was
Mhm.
to apply this, is this me or anyone listening sitting down in a chair, not having headphones on, not following a something guided, but I'm accepting wherever my thoughts are going, but I'm not supposed to be planning or thinking about my day? Like, how does
Mhm.
this actually work?
So I think that's one of the big misconceptions is people think they're not supposed to be planning or thinking about their day. And what I'm saying is you embrace it. You accept that. You could be thinking about anything. It doesn't matter what it is. And as long as it's not the thought that's the problem, it's your attitude about the thought that's the problem. It's when you start to judge it and start thought shaming yourself and start thinking, oh, I shouldn't be thinking about this, that, the other. That's the problem. And so the big switch is to go from, oh, why am I thinking about this to, oh, this is cool. I'm thinking about my day. I'm thinking about my to-do list. What else can I think about? You know, when you have that shift in your attitude, what you'll find, what you think is going to happen is I'm just going to keep thinking about this more and more. But what happens really is that thought starts to fade away. So that's the irony of it. When you lean into it, it goes away. When you resist it, guess what? It perpetuates. That's what makes you start to think about it more is you having an attitude about the fact that you're thinking it. So again, it's a little bit of like Yoda type of speak and just let it be but that's how you go beyond the thinking mind is by not resisting the thinking mind. That's the big secret to meditation.
Yeah. Hence why you're saying so much for its acceptance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's why I have 4 words for accepting:
You,
embrace, accept, surrender, yield. Because
yes.
once you master that, you start to see that the thing that you wanted to happen the whole time starts happening just automatically. But you can't look for it to happen. If you try to make it happen, you'll get the opposite result.
Yeah. Have you met anyone personally? Have you had a mentor or a coach or someone you've worked with who's inspired you from some of these things of having so much wisdom and that self reflection, that self awareness, that courage and willingness to go deep and understand yourself a little bit more and why you react the way that you do? Has there been anyone that has inspired you in that way?
100%. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I met this guy when I moved to LA and he became my spiritual teacher. And he was like my Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was fantastic. And I learned everything I know from him and just my whole approach to spirituality, to meditation. What made it great was he made it super relatable and there was very little denial of one's experience, which I find is pretty rampant in spiritual communities where, oh, you have this shadow side that you need to, move beyond. And, and so then it causes you to be shameful about all of that. and then we end up adopting this understanding that in order to be, quote, spiritual, we have to be soft spoken, we have to be calm, we have to let people treat us like a doormat, and because it's kind of like it's this thinking that, you know, you are going to put yourself in a position to not come back to planet Earth. So if you do all the right things, then you don't have to come back. In other words, it's like this heaven type of mentality. I'll just suffer through whatever I have to suffer through in this lifetime so that I can live everlasting eternity in the spirit world or something like that. But what he helped me do was kind of go beyond that and just understand that heaven is in every moment of your life. The more adaptable you are, the more heavenly your experiences will be, no matter what happened during that day. And the more reactive you are, the more hellish your experiences will be. He never said it like that, but that's the basic premise of that approach. And so the premium experience in life was to become as adaptable as you could possibly be. Just like we live in a capitalist society. So the premium experience in a capitalist society is you need to make money. You can't be broke and expect to have access and expect to be comfortable. You have to make money in order to purchase that, basically, on planet Earth. And so the energetic and spiritual equivalent of that is adaptability. If you don't have adaptability, you're broke. You're broke spiritually, you're broke emotionally, you're broke energetically as you're moving through your day. And just like they say in
Why?
capitalism,
Why? Really, why? I'm curious about that for people who,
because
because
you're subject to what happens to you. How you feel about yourself is dependent on what happens to you. So if you get unlucky and bad things happen to you, then you're going to feel bad about yourself. And that's going to take you out of the present moment. It's going to take you out of your potential and everything that you think you want to aspire to. But if you can be adaptable to those same things that happen, you can still be optimistic. You can still see a bigger vision for yourself. You can still be present and you can still contribute the things that you're here to contribute to the world.
how much of this would link to you used the word surrender before, and I'm curious about that, less from the spiritual perspective, but perhaps more from what this means very practically. Is it linked to a letting go of control, like letting go of some of the things that you actually cannot control in your life? Is that where the acceptance comes in, or the adaptability?
Well, in the technique, when I use the word in the easy approach, I'm specifically talking about um, whatever's happening in and around the practice, whether it's mentally, whether you're
Okay.
falling asleep, whether you're hearing noises, whatever the thing is. But you can't practice that every day and not have it carry over into your experiences outside of meditation as well, where you find yourself being less and less rigidly attached to the outcome and the timing of whatever's going on in your life. And all of that is in service to being present. So I put presence even above time as our most valuable asset. A lot of people, when they consider what's your most valuable asset, oh, time. I want to, because
Yeah.
you can't replace time. But I would argue that presence is actually more valuable because you can have all the free time in the world, but if you're not present for it, if you're using that time to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow or to regret what's happened yesterday, then it's not as valuable as someone who has less free time, but they're more present during the moments of their day. And therefore they're able to feel more connected. They're able to be more adaptable. They're able to see the best in others. And I think that is a more enriching experience and it leads to more fulfillment ultimately than just sitting around having a bunch of free time on your hands.
That's really powerful. And I like the word enrichment there. Like, I see the quality of the fulfillment that you're pointing out. If I think of recently some of the most joyful moments I've had, they have been when, whether you use the terms or not, when I've been fully present and fully engaged in what I'm doing. I'm not multitasking. I'm taking the time to truly savor an experience, whether that be sharing a nice laugh with my friend, or eating good food, or having a walk in nature and noticing something beautiful. It is really that slowing down that I suppose the meditation, with where we started, that is such a great entry point into that. because instead of just passively consuming and rushing through life and taking things for granted, we're instead encouraged to slow down and savor the experiences that we have on a daily basis and notice those moments, those little miraculous moments, much more frequently.
Yeah, and if you go to someone's funeral and people are doing the eulogy and giving up and standing up and giving reflections, all they're talking about are moments where the person who passed away was present with them. That's all they're talking about. No one's saying, oh, they had so much free time on their hands. It was wonderful how much free time they had. No, they're talking about, yeah, they were the ones that really saw me. They were the ones that were generous with me. They were the ones that, gave me insight into something that I never thought about it. You can't do that stuff without being present. And so presence is really the thing that people remember because it helps you connect with people on a deeper level than you would if you were preoccupied thinking about the past or the future.
Mm. Let's bring this back round to where we started, Light. And what would be some of your top tips or advice with integrating this meditation into a daily routine? And do you also recommend any other books or podcasts or things that could inspire people who are really opening up to this journey and want to follow and consume some more interesting information?
I mean, honestly, my whole professional career around this as a full-time meditation teacher for many, many years has been about offering as many on-ramps as possible to the practice. And so what that requires, honestly, is watering down the instruction. So, yeah, there are a lot of sort of watered down versions of this that people can use to just get enough reps under their belt to become more and more enticed. But ultimately, what you want is, again, you want to have delightful experiences. So the principles are the principles, right? Those don't really change. The principle of what you resist persists. That's not going to change. What you embrace, you'll be able to move beyond. That's not going to change. The only real difference is how long are you going to sit? And I would say it probably takes at least a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, just to have a tangible enough experience to be able to feel a visceral difference in what happened before and what happened after. Like, for instance, if a 1 minute or 2 minute long meditation was beneficial, then I would just be meditating for 1 or 2 minutes. But knowing what I know, think of it like a personal trainer. Like, there's a certain amount of exercise you have to do in order to build strength. You can't just go into the gym for 30 seconds and see any kind of tangible results after 6 months or a year. You got to spend some time understanding and incorporating the principles into your workout regimen, whatever that is. So my whole thing is, don't waste your time doing a bunch of nonsense. And I would put guided meditation in the nonsense category. Now, I'm not saying that as a negative thing. I'm just saying, if you want to get the benefits we've been talking about in the quickest amount of time, that's not going to get you there. That's going to keep you dependent on somebody whispering in your ear. Okay, now think about this. Now let go of that. Now imagine this. Like, that's like learning how to swim with floaties on your arm. Yeah, you're in the water. You're not going to drown, but you're not going to be winning any, triathlons anytime soon. If you want to have that experience, you have to understand how to move in concert with the hydrodynamics, which requires you at some point to take the floaties off. So I have an online community called the Happiness Insiders, which has a 7-day meditation kickstart. I admit it's a watered down approach to meditation, right? It's enough to get you interested in doing more. But in terms of, using just that to meditate with for the rest of your life, I would say at some point you want to graduate from that. And I'm just keeping it completely 100 with you, okay?
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that people present as meditation, again, these people aren't meditation teachers, most of them. Most of them are marketers, they're celebrities, they're monks, they're whatever. Learning how to meditate from a monk is like learning how to exercise from an NFL player. Like, monks are the professional athletes of meditation. You're going to find whatever they do too extreme. So it needs to fit within your lifestyle. And if you have a busy life, you have kids, and we started this a little late, you should put your kid to bed. That's normal. And so your meditation needs to fit within those kinds of things that are happening all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say 10 minutes is a good place to start, right? Especially if you're learning from a book. In fact, in my book, even though my personal practice is 20 minutes, I say don't start with 20 minutes. It's too extreme. Start with just 10 minutes. If you can't do 10, do 5 minutes and just practice the principle of acceptance. Just practice that. And then once you master that, you'll know it, because when those 10 minutes comes to the end, you'll want to stay longer. And then
Mm.
just stay 11 minutes and do that for a week consistently. And if you find yourself skipping, do it for another week consistently. And then once you build up the resiliency to sit for 7 days in a row and you absolutely enjoy those 11 minutes, then go to 12 minutes. So it's
Mhm.
taking this very gradual approach to applying the principles in the practice. And that's all that's really important, is the principles. And then once you have the principles down, then you can go and experiment with this group or that group, or and it's fine. You don't have to feel like this person is gonna, you know, open up some portal to some place that you can't get to on your own. You can get there completely fine on your own. And in fact, you may find that you have less of a desire to sit with other people guiding you, because you already kind of know how to get there. Just like if you know how to swim, you don't need somebody standing on the side of the pool going, okay, now right arm, kick, left arm, it's distracting. It's like, would you
Mhm.
shut the fuck up so I can swim? You don't need that. You can just go out there and enjoy for yourself.
Yeah. I want to finish because I know that you host retreats, don't you? And I first came across this. I remember, pure irony, it stood out to me. I was actually in a court in Australia, where I'm from, and there was the right before the judge came in, there are a few lawyers saying, oh, I did this silent meditation retreat last week. And it was hilarious because I think they were all really struggling. I mean, these people working in high pressure jobs where you are celebrated for being extremely cognitive and being able to use that intellect well. And then they're also actually suffering from it at the same time. And there was this thing of, I feel like I need this peace and a sense of lightness in my life. And part of an entry point for people is, can they have a collective experience? Can they join people? And I know that you host retreats. I think you recently did one in Mexico. What is the benefit of doing something like that? And if people are interested, where can they find some more information on you for this?
So silent retreats, the 10-day retreats or 3-day silent retreats usually are facilitated by monks, which means it's more or less a monastic practice, which means you're going to have a very difficult time. It's not to say that people can't get through it, but it's kind of like the equivalent of running a triathlon or running an Ironman, actually, for a lot of people. It's the meditation version of that. And that's fine. It's a cool experience. It's like um, I guess, things you
Bucket
can
list
talk about.
items.
Yeah, bucket list. I did this,
Yes.
um, but the real test is not what happens on the silent retreat. The real test is what happens once you get home. Because the going home program on the silent retreat is you meditate once in the morning for 1 hour and then once in the evening for 1 hour. So the whole point of the retreat is to train you to do this on your own. Okay. What you find with most people, if you ask them this question, do you still do your 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening? After maybe a couple of weeks, most of them don't. 95% of them don't, right? Only the diehards end up doing it. And if you ask the diehards, okay, well, tell me about the rest of your life. They're usually single. They don't have a lot of, family responsibilities or obligations, because you can't have kids and meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening and go to work and keep your spouse happy and have, recreational activities. It's not sustainable. And it's very difficult to become self-sufficient with that kind of obligation to your meditation practice. And when you're doing it for the hour, it's not that delightful. So when people start to understand this, like really get that it needs to fit in your lifestyle, then it edits things down to really just a couple of options, right? And so I would say the most important thing is not what happens when you learn it, whether you're learning it on a retreat or you're learning it in a workshop in your city or whatever. even with my retreat, I'm just basically teaching the same thing I would teach in a workshop in the city. We're just doing it on the beach because you get distraction free instruction and it's not silent. You know, the meditation we do on the retreat is just 20 minutes, just like the one I teach people to do at home is 20 minutes. And if you can't do 20, do 10 minutes. And if you can't do 10, do 5 minutes or whatever. And the real test is what happens when you get back home. So I'm personally, proud to say that when people come on a retreat, or even if you come to one of my, local workshops, I put you in the best possible position to be able to do this on your own, in your car, in an Uber, on a plane, in the dentist's office lobby when you're waiting for your kid to get done, in the soccer line when you're waiting for somebody to finish practice. Like, you want to be able to do this anywhere. You don't want to have a cushion, a Zufu, whatever they call that stuff, staring at a wall. You want to be able to do this in a shopping mall. You want to be able to do this in a in an amusement park, anywhere where you can find a seat. It doesn't have to be quiet. You just want to
Mhm.
have comfortable back support and be able to close your eyes in an environment where you're not going to get mugged or anything like that. And then you can have a pretty delightful experience, because it needs to happen on a regular basis in order for you to have the type of benefits that you ultimately want to have from the practice.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Light. It has been such a pleasure. And I think such a guide to get started. And I think going back for people listening to where we started with some of these benefits that we can hope to experience from this, to be able to feel more joy and fulfillment, to slow down, enjoy and savor the experiences, to be more responsive and less reactive. So we feel more in control and proud of the days that we are living, proud of how we are showing up in life. I hope that Light and this conversation has sparked that in you, at least enough curiosity to, if you haven't so far, to go and give it a try, perhaps to go and get Light's book or Bliss More, How to Succeed in Meditation, and otherwise keep following this journey with me. Light, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation.